few of the ASQSE data analysis pieces, but not really data analysis. We'll talk about what you should be thinking about as a data coordinator for the spring ASQ data collection. It might be good to kind of start talking with your leadership team about what it is you want the ASQSE data to help you with. And then we'll talk about how you can train your staff to complete the BIR report, so the Behavior Incident Report. So not to put any pressure on you, but for those of you on the line, have you already sent in your ASQSE data?
No, today though. It's done and ready to go. I just wanted to make sure. I have a question for you.
Okay, great. So let's just talk about the questions, because if you've got questions, everybody else has questions as well. So I'm going to try one more time. Oh, hey, Michelle.
Hey, it's unmuted now.
Okay, good. So I unmuted you, so now everyone can talk.
Okay.
So let's figure out how to do this. So really, when we think about recommended practices in progress monitoring, so the pyramid model really is a tiered, multi-tiered level of intervention. It's a framework for thinking about multi-tiered levels of intervention around social and emotional development. And we know that the science suggests that it's repeated screenings that are recommended practices in kind of keep monitoring a child's development in certain areas, and that the use of sort of brief, inexpensive tools that are predictive can help to identify children and families that would benefit from early and targeted strategies. So that's our hope, that the collection of the ASQSE data is about allowing you as a program to collect a very quick snapshot of where children in your program are, and to use that data to make decisions about which kids are below cutoff, right? So those are kids without concerns. We can be rest assured that our universal, our targeted, our individualized interventions in a quick snapshot look are telling us that these kids are doing okay. We're meeting the needs of kids. And we typically say about 80% of kids should have their needs met through universal practices. And then your ASQ data can help you look at the children who scored at cutoff. So we'll talk about what that means, because the manual for the ASQSE doesn't define at cutoff. That's a local decision, and we'll remind you of resources about that. And those are those kids who are, in how we're interpreting this in Wisconsin, 1 or 2 points away, right? 1 or 2 parts of a question being answered differently away from scoring at cutoff. So those are kids that you're probably going to want to monitor for their development, kind of keep a close tabs on them. And then to identify the kids who are above cutoff, those who are above the threshold designed by the creators of the tool. And those are kids who need additional assessment information gathered, additional data gathered, or that you need to begin to design some interventions for. So as far as who completes the ASQSE, that's a program level decision. And we talked about this on the last web call as well, and I know that many of you were on that web call, but you can do it in any combination that you want, as long as what you do in the fall is what you do in the spring, so that you can compare apples to apples. That's one of the purposes. Certainly, as you step into really using repeated screenings or using consistent screening for progress monitoring purposes, not just child find purposes, you may shift your practices based on a team decision, and we understand that. So at this point, how are you guys collecting the ASQSE information in the fall? Who's scoring it?
So again, we're having the parents fill them out.
Okay.
But the one thing we have that is being noted as a concern is that the children a lot of times are behaving incredibly different at home than they are in school.
Sure.
So that's where it's really hard. For example, my daughter's in the classroom that's filling them out this year, and she is a different child at home. I mean, I filled it out, and when her teachers say it's not the same child. So I don't know if it is representative with only the parents filling them out.
Right.
But we don't really know, because we can't answer as teachers some of those questions on there either.
Right, right. And so that has led some programs to really sit down, and if they have a fall conference, some programs are completing the ASQSE at the fall conference, or having parents complete it, having teachers complete it, and then comparing the scores. So that seems a little cumbersome as well. So, you know, I think your question goes to what is the broader purpose of pyramid model implementation, and that's to improve social emotional development across a child's day, right?
Okay.
And so that may be if a lot of your, if there are children who are flagging as having significant concerns in the home, and those concerns aren't being noted in the school, that's good information for your leadership team to kind of think about, and think about what are the support that families may need in translating the pyramid model practices into the home. And you know I know that all of you know that because you participated in the benchmarks of quality rating at your site, but that whole family involvement and the role of kind of bridging the connection between school and home is part of what you're measuring on your benchmarks of quality. How are other sites on the phone collecting the information?
In Fond du Lac, we send it home before parent-teacher conferences, and then the parents complete it, and it is discussed at conferences. And we've been doing this about, I think this is our 3rd year.
Okay.
And we have seen the same thing that she mentioned, that parents will see a different child at home than we see at school. So we do use it as a springboard for those conversations to help families with those behaviors that they're seeing at home. We also have, we were part of a CSI grant, and that's why we started it 3 years ago, and through the CSI grant, we were able to develop a continuum of services for the schools and the Fond du Lac community, so that that resource is available for families that feel they might be at that Tier 2, possibly even Tier 3 level with a child. And also our countywide Sprout has come up with community agencies and resources to help support families with social emotional development. So
that's just marvelous, right? And I think truly reflective of what the framework is getting at, that it really is a tiered level. It's a framework for thinking about what are the resources that exist at multiple levels.
Right.
And those resources, as Fond du Lac identified, are often can be outside of the school. And so it's collaborative partnerships that I know that the Fond du Lac community has really worked hard and diligently at bridging those collaboratives.
Right. The issue we have, and I'm sure other districts are seeing the same thing, is getting them back. You know, teachers try very hard. They encourage them, if they don't have one at conference, they have extras and try and get them to fill it out at conference time. And my other issue that I'm dealing with, and I think Head Start will support us, Head Start does it with their families, but because they feel they do it in the Head Start portion, not the 4K, they see it as their information, and unless parents give permission, and I'm broaching them and just saying, can you give me general scores to give me an idea? You know, I don't need to know names, but give me some data on your children. So that's, and I'll be honest, I'm getting my information from teachers, but with our fall assessment and doing the PALS pre-K, and then having to do conferences and score all of this starting, you know, in the beginning of October till now, I'll probably get my data in Monday, I'm thinking.
I really want to restate this over and over again, that while we believe it's in best practices to sort of follow the timelines for collecting the data, right? You want sort of have this sense of true baseline and to have ASQ screening data early enough to advise on which kids you may need more information, which kids may need to move into Tier 2 or Tier 3 levels of intervention. Please, please, please understand that Lana and I and the state leadership team know that you have many, many responsibilities on your plate. And so we will take the data whenever you can get it to us.
And we appreciate that.
Okay. Truly, truly, I don't think we can say that enough, that what we appreciate is at least you're being mindful about collecting the information and then eventually summarizing it, right? Because if you're collecting it, your team should be taking a peek at it. But then getting it to us when you can. So I want to go back to what you said as well. I think that makes sense that as the ASQ, certainly the ASQ3, but the ASQSE is increasing in the number of systems who are using it. I think we do need to think creatively about how to share at least some information. Or, you know, I've heard stories in some places where parents who are handed an ASQSE and they said, well, I just filled that out at the clinic. Why do you need this again?
Right.
So, yeah.
That's been an ongoing discussion in Fond du Lac, I can tell you, with Sprout and with the countywide agencies and looking at the medical profession, looking at now in the WIC area, they've got assessment and how do you share that information. And we were at one point looking at the online data entry for the county, but there were just so many glitches with that HIPAA and sharing information. It just got very complicated.
Right. I know I'm doing some work in Northwest Wisconsin with a couple of counties that are trying to address just that issue. And we're looking at actually some of the work that Sprout is doing in Fond du Lac County. And I agree. There are so many complexities in sharing child-level data. So, which is why, so I'll bring us back to sort of the ASQSE under the pyramid model umbrella. That's why we ask you just to send sort of summative information to us, that there isn't really information that can be tracked to individual kids. So is there anyone else who wanted to comment on how you're currently collecting your ASQSE information?
Julie, this is West Bend speaking, and this is our first year we implemented the ASQ, and we did it as part of our registration process, and we sat down with families to fill out paperwork, and we went over the questions with them, and collected, scored it and added some more information. We more or less used that then to help, along with another assessment, divide up our children for classrooms. To determine, and then from there, what interventions we might need to have, and talk about those further at the first initial home visit we had with the parents. So, but that's how
lovely.
So
great. It sounds like you're really using your ASQSE information really as formative assessment, really to think about where do we go from here. So that's lovely. It was exciting. Thanks for talking, everybody. So I think you all have access. I know that you all have access to this, but hopefully you've seen this chart. It's part of a bigger chart, and where we've mapped out for each of the interval ranges for the ASQSE, what might be cutoff scores using the 5-point range and what might be cutoff scores using the 10-point range. So you can get a sense of who might be close to cutoff. If you haven't used this chart to figure out close to cutoff, that's fine as well. That might be something that as you continue to build capacity in your programs, you begin to think about which kids who are falling in that sort of that yellow range, that range that of not quite crossing the threshold for cutoff, but are pretty close, so need some monitoring. Hopefully this isn't news to anybody, and I can show you where that information is. Questions at all about the close to cutoff scores?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
So in the fall, then you'll indicate the total number of children who were screened, and then this is a new question, and there's lots of ASQSE spreadsheets floating out there. So if your spreadsheet doesn't have this second question, the number of children that you screened who are in a classroom receiving pyramid model coaching, I may follow up with you about that. And that's hopefully a number you can sort of lay your hands on rather quickly. We don't want this to be agonizing for anybody. But what we learned, we didn't ask this question in the past. And so we are trying to collect this information at the state level. So maybe you screen all the children in your program, but right now you have the capacity to coach 2 teachers. And so, you screen 100 kids, but maybe only 30 of those kids are in a classroom that's receiving pyramid model coaching. We just would like to have that information at the state to get a sense of how we might weight your data. Does that make sense?
Would you send us a new one, because I have my data from last year, which does not have that on?
Absolutely. And so what I'll do, Michelle, is if we change the data, then it's our responsibility to get it entered. And I'll be following up with people when we get to that. Okay.
So should I not send my scores in to you and wait until I get the link to this new one, or should I send them in and just kind of make note on it with an email?
That would be perfect. That would be absolutely perfect, Michelle. Just send me what you've got, and then let me know how many kids are in that room. That'd be great. And then what I'll do is I'll take the data and transfer it to a new form and send it back to you so that you have the new form and all the pretty graphs it can do.
All right,
okay?
That sounds perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So really, really it sounds like, and so I'm curious about that. What I'm hearing is that you're screening all the kids who are enrolled in your program in the fall. Is that what I'm hearing from you guys? You're universally screening all enrolled children.
Yeah.
We are only receiving, we're only screening the kids right now who are in classrooms that have been through coaching in the past or are getting coached currently.
Okay.
They're not doing every student in the entire school yet.
Okay, great. So you're really using the second option on the screen. You're screening just those kids in the pyramid model classrooms.
Yes.
Okay, and then some sites are doing their own action research. So they're kind of screening kids who are in the pyramid model classrooms, and then they're also screening in one other classroom that's not being coached, just to get a sense of our kids in our pyramid model classrooms doing differently than kids who aren't in pyramid model classrooms. And if you're interested in sort of sorting out your data that way, you can email me about that, and I'd be very interested in exploring that with you. And for those of you who are watching the archived version of this, you also could email me and let me know if you're interested in sort of splitting your data reports by number of kids who are in a pyramid model class and the number of kids who aren't, and I can try to adjust the spreadsheet for you. Okay? So then what we recommend based on best practices and the concept of repeated screenings for progress monitoring, but you will create your own local decision rules for your spring screen. And I think part of it is looking at what is the purpose of your spring rescreen. So if the purpose is to meet your pyramid model data commitment, then you might only rescreen kids who are close to cutoff or above cutoff. If you really want to get a global sense of your population and the progress that they've made, then you may rescreen. But we know that some programs have other sources of data that they're using. So some programs, for instance, are using teaching strategies goals and are monitoring children's social emotional development and using that information as both formative and summative assessment. So maybe rescreening all children isn't practical or useful. So your options are to rescreen only those kids who scored close to cutoff or above cutoff in the fall, or to rescreen everybody that you screened in the fall, so you have a comparative sample, or just to rescreen everyone who's currently enrolled in the program. So you'll have to talk about this with your leadership team. Our recommendations in the past were that just everyone was rescreened. If you rescreened everybody in the fall, you rescreened everybody in the spring. In talking with our programs who have been implementing, they requested the option to rescreen only those kids who scored close to cutoff and above cutoff. So we want to be responsive to what's practical for you all. Thoughts about this?
I have a question.
Sure.
In the past, in Fond du Lac, this screening information was not passed on to the kindergarten teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Are there school districts that are using the SE that are putting that information into the CUME folder to go on to kindergarten?
Nancy, I don't know the answer to that, but I can check on that and get back to you.
Yeah,
and probably. So your question is, what do you do with the ASQSE scores, and then do you pass it on?
Right.
Does it go in the CUME? Is it part of the CUME file?
Right. What does that, just like other information does get passed on, this isn't really an assessment, it's a screener. So that's where we've kind of vacillated, and it was felt that this information shouldn't be passed on, but I don't know.
Okay. And you are a PBIS district as well, right?
Correct.
And so are you using any sort of gated screening? Are you doing any behavioral or social emotional screen as part of your PBIS implementation?
At kindergarten? Or
right. Yeah.
I don't know. I live in the 4K world, so okay. I would have to check.
Sure, sure. And this is where sort of bridging those connections between teams, and you're a district who's going to help us figure out how that works.
Okay.
Because this could be, so a spring screen could be a good data source for the kindergarten PBIS implementation. There could be some good information there.
Thanks.
So I'll check and get back to you. Other thoughts about the spring screen and how you will proceed? I'll show you what we'll look for then in the spring report. So we just want you to tell us how many kids did you screen in the spring, and then again the number of those kids who are in a pyramid model, classroom receiving pyramid model coaching. And then out of the total number of kids who were screened in the spring, you report how many with scores above cutoff, close to cutoff, and below cutoff. So just the same information that we collected in the fall, we collect from you in the spring. You don't need to tell us how many were the same kids who were rescreened, or You just give us the global information. But then we ask 2 additional questions. So in the spring, the spreadsheet will automatically populate. So if you said there were 10 kids who scored above cutoff in the fall, we'd like you to look at their rescreen scores. So minimally, we'd like you to rescreen the kids who scored above cutoff or close to cutoff. We'd like you to sort of look specifically at their scores. And of those 10 kids who scored above, who scored above cutoff, how many of those kids remained above cutoff, are now scoring close to cutoff, or are below cutoff, have scores that indicate that their development is back on track. Same thing for those kids who scored close to cutoff. So if you had 20 kids who scored close to cutoff, where did they fall in the rescreen? So questions about that?
I do have one question. We have a very high percentage of special education, and almost all of them are scoring close to or above cutoff. So my concern is it's not going to look like we're doing a lot for them if their numbers don't change.
No. Great question, Michelle. And I think that your question is a question that many people have. And that especially those of us in early childhood want the data to show that how hard we're working. But I think where we're landing is that the data is just the data, and that the data leads us to at least wonder why, right? And so when you put the data up and your leadership team takes a look at that, and they say, wow, you know, we had 10 kids who were above cutoff in the spring and we haven't reduced their risk at all. They're still above cutoff. Why? Why is that? And there could be very, very reasonable, very good reasons for the team to consider. Okay?
Okay.
So what the graph will show, and so I'll just show you the possible graph. So what the graph will do is it will show you how many kids in spring and fall, total population score at each level, and then it will graph out in the spring the results of how kids scored who are above cutoff and close to cutoff in the fall. This is made up information, by the way, to respond to Michelle's question, okay? There are resources, and I will send you this PowerPoint, but there are 2 resources I would recommend. The first resource is from TAXI, which is CEPL's sister center, and it's around screening, social emotional screening tools, sort of elements to consider, and they've rated each tool available on the market based on their criteria, and it does have a page, I think it's page 11, has sort of the information, for the ASQSE. In case people are wondering, why are we using the ASQSE? That's a resource for you. And then the ounce of prevention resource also is a good resource for explaining or providing information about why would we rescreen kids. We screened them when they were 3, and now we're screening them when they enter 4K, and why would we rescreen them again? So in case you're fielding questions about repeated screenings, that could be a good resource for you. Okay. Any other questions about the ASQSE?
No.
Okay. I will admit that the ASQSE piece of the data collection is a piece that we haven't completely dug into. It's a piece that we're continuing to adjust based on feedback from our sites. So we will probably be in touch with you at some point during the year, or at least we'll retouch again on one of these data coordinator calls about any suggestions you might have for a more efficient use of collecting, summarizing, and analyzing your data. Okay, so let's take a look at the behavior incident report data and how you collect that information. Before we start, are any of you already collecting the BIR or the behavior incident report data in your programs?
We are in Sheboygan.
Okay.
No, we're not in Fond du Lac yet.
Okay.
No, we're not in West Bend.
Okay. Okay. So then for Sheboygan, this might be review. And in our next call, we'll look at what you can do with the BIR data. So really, when we think about the behavior incident reports, there's a couple reasons that we ask that BIR information is collected as part of program-wide adoption. First of all, it helps you really identify which children have challenges, and it allows you to really do some data digging about what those challenges are specifically for children with their behavior. There are elements of the data collection that allow you to capture not just externalizing behaviors, but to get a sense about internalizing behaviors, though the BIR form itself is pretty heavily weighted for externalizing behaviors. And then the BIR data summaries, the graphic summaries, are really what your leadership team will use to think about what adjustments might need to be made in any of the policies, procedures, practices, or professional development related to your pyramid model implementation. And really, the BIR reports are another source of information for you, for the leadership team to report out progress on your pyramid model implementation, because it allows you to see the changes in incidents over time. So it's very much, the BIR is very much like the school-wide information system or SWIS system that some of your K-12 systems may be collecting as part of PBIS implementation. So what we are learning is that if and when you begin to ask teachers to collect the BIR reports, if they don't see the data that comes from them and how the data is used, they will stop giving you BIR forms. So just a bit of information there. We talked about this at the team training. I think you all have seen the behavior incident report. I'll show you where you can get the incident report. We, at the top of the form, you see that it asks for a child's code, and it asks for referring staff or class. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. If you want to be able to pull the data as a leadership team and really be able to look and drill at child level data, you may want to consider using a child code. Child codes have varied across our programs. Some are as complex as using the child's birth, initials. And some programs have used other more numeric codes. But the database, unlike the SWIS database, if you're familiar with that, does not code the child for you. You'll have to think about how to code the child. The form itself is designed to be completed in 30 seconds or less by a classroom teacher. And we've asked about that in some of our program sites. Pretty much completing the form itself takes probably about 5 seconds. Thinking about the incident takes the other 25 seconds. So it's an opportunity for teachers to reflect on sort of what happened and to fill out the information. So there is web-based training for your staff, and you can find. Say that one more time.
I have a question about the form. The form we have has different categories than ones I'm seeing on the one on your screen.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, we don't have teasing as an option. We have like social withdrawal or isolation as an option on ours. It's different. So did something change? Or?
There are several BIR forms out there.
Okay.
Yes. Did you adapt your form?
No, we did not change our forms. These are the ones we were given not this past summer, but the summer of 12.
Okay. Okay. So we can talk about that then. You can decide to change the form. Have you been entering the data, Michelle, into the database?
It's just with us. We haven't sent it with. Are we supposed to send it to you? Because I did not know that.
No. We don't collect this information. But are you entering? Are people taking the paper forms and entering the information into the database?
Yeah, I have somebody every single Wednesday. I have somebody who spends a couple hours and gets it all in, and then we review it as needed. Okay. Okay. So Michelle, you and I will follow up and figure out what's different about your form and the system. So we'll figure out what the difference is. We'll do it another time. Sounds good to me. Thanks. Okay. So this form is available on the Collaborating Partners program-wide login. That's on Collaborating Partners, and that's where you click on program-wide sites login. And the username is capital pyramid, no space, capital model, and the password is 10, no space, program-wide. And I think you have this. And then, so it brings you to the screen, and under monitoring implementation outcomes, it's slow because I'm recording. Hopefully yours doesn't take so much time. Under the monitoring implementation outcomes, there's a folder that says behavior incident report. And you can get the BIR form here by just downloading. You can get the BIR instructions. And then if you click in this folder, BIR training for staff, you can get everything that you need to train your staff. So it's another copy of the BIR form, the BIR instructions, and the BIR webinar. Okay, I'll show you what the BIR webinar is. Before you do the BIR webinar with your staff, you'll need to decide how your staff will access the paper BIR forms and then where they're going to turn it in, because you'll have to provide them with that information. And then you need to kind of be thinking about who's going to enter the BIRs into the database and when and where. So Michelle, you've identified somebody, and on Wednesdays they take time to enter the BIRs into the database? Yeah. Okay. So I heard you say it takes hours to enter? No. In the beginning, it takes a couple hours to get caught up, just because we don't set them right in the. We wait until we get a giant file. But now well, they're kind of dwindling down. But we have a meeting next week where we're going to talk about how important it is to fill them out again. So I'm sure next week we'll have a ton more. You bet. You bet. And I think you raise a really good point, Michelle. Not just Sheboygan, but everybody that it experiences lulls in sort of the BIRs, and so what a great plan to talk about that, right? We're seeing a decrease, not quite sure if it's because behavior incidents are going down or because people aren't reporting, so marvelous. We're hopeful that the data entry we're hearing can take as few as 15 minutes a week to enter once you're caught up. Yeah. So that's relief. We have 650 students in our school, so it does take a little longer because it's a large population. You bet. You bet. Okay. So the Behavior Incident Report database is free, and you need to have Microsoft Access installed on your computer for it to run.
there is a freeware version of Microsoft Access. It's called Runtime. And so you can enter data and pull the graphs, but you can't, if you're using the freeware, the Runtime freeware, you can't do as many things as if you're operating with the Access Database program. Pretty much Access Database is typically purchased as part of Microsoft Office Suite or Microsoft Office package. Many times, I'm sorry, not many times, we have heard somewhat often that tech support doesn't always install the Access program on teachers or schools' computers, but that it does exist within systems, so you can ask about that. Are any of you in a situation where you don't have access to Access? So you all have access.
Well, we use Microsoft, or we don't use Microsoft, we use Mac computers, and I had to get my computer turned into a dual boot to get the Access put on it so I could have the PC side so it would work.
Got it. Yeah. Macintosh users, we are struggling because of use of the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
There is, I will say this, there is a purchase service, a subscription service that is available. I can get you information about that if you email me. It is the Behavior Incident Report Database. We know very little about that database. It was created by the taxi folks, and it is a fee-for-service. We're not sure how or what graphic displays you can pull from that, but that is an option for you. You can download the, so I'm back in the program-wide site, you can download the Access databases right here. So you just download that onto one computer, and then you can begin to input your information. And here's a link to install Runtime if you need it. So questions about where you get the database. Okay. What I'm looking for. So here is a document, and again, you can download this. It's in the BIR training for staff. You download the document, and I want to explain what the training is. The training is training completed by Dr. Lisa Fox, who was the program coordinator for TAXI. And she recorded this webinar on using the BIR. She uses references to Florida. Because the information is so relevant, because she has a high degree of expertise, and because, frankly, the recording quality is so excellent, and it's been difficult for us to replicate the recording quality, we're recommending that you use this webinar to train your staff. So the webinar itself is 34 minutes long. We recommend doing it in a group format. Each person should have a copy of the BIR instructions, or at least each classroom grouping should have a copy of the BIR instructions. They should have at least 2 copies of the BIR in front of them. And then there's a when do I complete the BIR summary handout. In the folder, you can use that if you wish. So when you click on,
hi, this is Lisa Fox.
So you click on the link, and the webinar opens up, and she voices it. You can click on certain chapters on the right-hand side. If you want to re-listen to anything, you can rewind it and replay it again. A big feature of the training is there are 7 videos So what we recommend is you show the video clip, you pause it to give people time to figure out, first of all, would I complete a BIR in this situation, and then what would I check? And then you can play her answers and then pause it again to have people reflect on would they have entered something differently. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's called the BIR webinar to train staff. The video examples are primarily preschool examples. There is a toddler example of physical aggression that doesn't feel very aggressive to me. So I might recommend you kind of eyeball the videos before you show them. You don't have to show them all. You can skip around and you can highlight and show only certain videos as part of the staff training. So meaning the program doesn't make you go through each chapter. You can do some skipping around. So when you think about coding the data, so we are having more programs like Fond du Lac who are implementing across their 4K programs, and those 4K classrooms are in different buildings. Sheboygan, is that true for you as well?
We only have 2 other 4K classrooms that are in different buildings, and they are not doing this. Their schools decided to have them follow the PBIS.
Okay.
Everyone else is in one building.
Okay. So here's food for thought, and I'll show you the data that you can pull from it. But I just want to give some helpful hints. What I might suggest is that if you are implementing across multiple buildings, that when people fill out the BIR form, that they indicate the building and then their teacher code, and that you code it that way. And I'll show you how you can do that. I'm going to show you how you can use administrative items to get all your staff entered into the system before you begin collecting the BIRs, so that data entry is a little bit faster. Please remember that spelling counts when you enter in the staff names. I'm gonna restate this. I highly recommend that someone goes in and sets up the staff drop down prior to beginning to enter the BIR report. And I'll show you why that is when we look at the BIR. We're recommending that really there's one central location, there's one computer in the district and one spot for data entry, that all of the paper forms come to one place, and that's where they get entered. You can edit fields, so you can edit the activity descriptions, you can edit the people involved. We are still exploring how efficient it is to pull the data when you edit the fields. So we're going to recommend that you wait to do any edits to the fields until we have more information. And then when you're manipulating in between the pages of the database, remember to right-click on the tab to save any changes or not save changes. So let me just show you. So here's the Behavior Incident Report data system. This is a system that already has data in it. So it's going to look maybe a little bit different. But if you click under administrative items, so you guys as data coordinators, you can add a staff code to the drop-down list. So what I'm recommending is that, say you have program, I'm going to call it Program C because there's a Program A and a Program B in here. So Program C is one of your 4K sites, and the teacher code is JB. Okay, you would hit save, and then you can keep adding new people. And when you get that set up, then there's a drop-down code or a drop-down list when people go to enter the data. Okay. So I right-clicked on this tab, and I'm going to save it, and then I'm going to close it. All right. When you enter a behavior incident report, you go to behavior incident report, and you put add behavior incident report. So we're going to code the child, and this is where the staff code shows up. Okay. So to make it just a little bit faster, let's say that it's an event that happened today. Whoops. And the time of the occurrence is 12:25 p.m. Any sense of a, let's say, inconsolable crying during quiet time, and the teacher was involved. The possible motivation was to avoid the task, and the child was provided with physical comfort. Okay. And then you hit save. If you want to make a new record, you hit new. Okay. Again, you right-click, hit save, and then right-click and hit close. Okay. And then when you go in, then you can pull up the graphs by month. You can pull up the graphs by behavior type. You can tell it which month you're looking at. So we'll do it this way. So that's across a couple years. By activity, by staff. You can pull up the graph by consequences, and that I feel this graph is a little overwhelming, but you can get a sense of if, say, you're highlighting reducing the use of timeout, you can get a sense of whether or not your work around that is making a difference. You can pull up BIRs by child. Okay. And next month I'll show you how to really analyze data. You can make it, you can kind of make this do a lot of, I think, pretty neat stuff. And you can pull up BIRs by motivation. Okay. And again, you can kind of tell it which months you want to look at. So next month we'll explore data drilling using the BIR. But that's a little bit about what you can do. So again, if you have multiple sites, I would recommend setting up sort of the which building the program, or which building the behavior occurred in, and which teacher is filling out the report. If you have staff who travel across multiple buildings, maybe their code is the building and then their staff code. So if I'm an itinerant special education teacher who travels across multiple programs, I might have program code, program A, JB, program B, JB, program C, JB. If you code it that way, when you go to pull the data, which we'll talk about next month, you can kind of sort the data by program. This probably doesn't make any sense, but hopefully you'll trust me. So questions at all about how to train staff in using the BIR?
Nothing. We've done it already. So.
Okay. We have heard some programs are at staff meetings throwing out a scenario, having the BIR projected on the screen, throwing out a scenario, and walking staff through scoring, particularly in selecting a possible motivation, a possible function. We are hearing from sites that in the beginning, many teachers select "I don't know" as a possible function, that as a possible motivation, and that the leadership team really thought about how to just have more practice for teachers and kind of making a guess about function. Okay. So any other questions?
Not at this time.
No.
Okay. All right. Great. So good luck with your staff training. If you have any questions at all about where or how to access any of the materials, please email me either at wipyramidmodel@gmail.com or julieb@cisa11.k12.wi.us. So thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.